I'm David Glenn Taylor, and this is the Voyagers Podcast. I'm excited about this episode, and a little scared, because we're talking about dancing today. Little secret about me, I've had this chronic fear of the dance floor, of putting myself out there, just letting go and, moving your body to the music, not caring about how awkward I might look, a midlife bald guy flailing his arms around. Anytime I dance in the kitchen, my kids, they beg me to stop. But I am convinced that I can overcome this. I've had little breakthroughs the last few years, and that's why I'm so excited about our guest this week. Jasmine Raphael is a hip-hop dancer. She's a choreographer and a dance educator in Los Angeles. She's been on stage with some of the biggest stars out there, Ariana Grande, Nikki Minaj, and she has a deep philosophy on what dance is, what it can be, and why we can all benefit from learning to move our bodies without abandon. This interview was almost like therapy for me, a master lesson in how not to care what other people think, and how to connect with other people in a way that, frankly, I never realized you could. Okay, here's the deal. See, in our family, my brother was the dancer, and he kind of figured that out. I don't know, some part of him. He's like, he like his kid. They do like hip hop dance classes and stuff like that. He loves that. I was always the more shy of the two of us, kind of terrified of that. And
oh my God.
Never danced. Oh man, I would love to ask you about inhibitions and stuff like that during this interview. But what I want to do is, in terms of like your take on what that is and where, because I maybe somewhat naively assume that you were born a dancer.
Right. And I was going to just, respond to you that I'm sure that you can dance, and I'm because everyone can dance. I've been an educator too for 15 years as well. So that's the first thing that I tell people. Often us dancers, professional dancers, or even my dancers in conservatory, I'm just getting them back to this, how they feel when they listen to music, because that's your dance. Everyone has a dance. I almost think about it as you have a relationship with this entity called dance. And I think everyone has it. It's just your natural reaction to music that you like, I think, so you can dance.
But I recognize I'll just tell you a really quick story. A couple of years ago, I went to a wedding in St. Louis of a good friend of mine. And after the wedding ceremony, they had the after party or whatever you want to call it. It was on this rooftop in this really old part of St. Louis, and it was killer. And a friend of mine was a DJ, and in fact, he's going to be on the podcast too. And my wife and I were there. I didn't know a lot of people there, and my wife for years has been trying to call me out of this fear that I have of being up in front of people and moving my body. And, so I finally did, and I had a blast. But the whole time I was still very aware that I look like a goofball, when I'm up there. You probably had to make quite a study out of people who are dancing and fears. What are some of the things that you see? How do you get people, like in your experience, how do you get people to move out of that space and into this space where they feel free and they genuinely feel it, not like me on the dance floor having fun, but also still kind of scared?
Oh my gosh. I love that question too, because it's something every day we're trying to work on. For me, it's really helpful to connect the dancer to something outside of themselves. It depends also on the kind of student that I observe them to be. If they're kind of someone that just wants to figure something out, then I'll tell them, hey, like, how when you pull this, it's kind of like feels like taffy as opposed to just going like a cash register, like ching, because then they're focused on something outside of themselves. I think that's the trick. Right. But, more advanced dancers, or even not an advanced dancer, someone that you can tell just feels dance emotionally, it's helpful for me to paint analogies that are like, man, like what would you say is just like the vibe of this song? They'd be like happy. And then it's like, oh, cool. Like, then it's just happiness and sort of like, when you're like, hey, what's up? It's, I think just the core of your question, it's focusing someone on something outside of themselves so that self-consciousness doesn't engage.
Right. The first episode of The Voyagers was with a guy who makes wine. He's a winemaker for Behringer out in Napa, California, and
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah,
That's
and he talked
fascinating.
about describing wine similar to how you're describing that. Like he talked about how he would use music analogies and then slowly kind of expand his vocabulary. You're talking about cash registers and taffy, and as soon as you said that, I went, right. That would be so
Right.
helpful to have those visuals and be like,
Yeah.
Were you a dancer? Were you born a dancer?
Was I born a dancer? I don't know if I was born a dancer, but I did love moving my body since I was
Right.
really little. But I didn't start actually training in dance till maybe 16. I did take a few years when I was younger, but I told my mom, like, I don't want to,
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
so when I was 16, I got back into the studio. But prior to then, I was doing more just like crew stuff or, doing things for church, like little shows or copying music videos with my friends.
Right.
And I found like it was just a fun thing. I'm such a ham, honestly. I
Right.
can't get away from it. As an adult, I have to just accept it too.
Right.
Like, I do like to perform in front of people. I like seeing the reaction of people being lit up.
Right.
So that was always a thing. But dance was, I don't know, seems so achievable, and I just had a lot of energy in my body.
Yeah. So your parents didn't they didn't knock you for it. I grew up in church too, but in our church and in my school I went to in high school and stuff like that, dancing was just this. It was considered kind of, unless you were dancing before the Lord, right? That was the term that was used in our home. Then dancing was just not a thing you did. It was kind of, that old saying of a horizontal expression of, or no, how was it? A vertical expression of horizontal desires is what it was always. I know that sounds crazy, right? I know to your ears that's got to sound so crazy.
No, it doesn't. No, I have a lot of experience with church, so yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But you didn't. But your parents weren't like that. That's not how you grew up understanding it.
No, not really. Because my family is also a family of performers. My father was a pianist. I started dancing after he passed away.
Oh, okay.
But my mom was more so like, my mom's kind of like that too. She's kind of a dancer, and she's like the choir director, and just, we're all performers. So they never weren't like that.
And you grew up in a Filipino home?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Both mom and dad are Filipino?
Yes.
Now, did they come from the Philippines, or do you still have a good family roots and stuff in the Philippines?
We have a lot of family roots in the Philippines. Just pretty much so many people still there, but mostly my mom and dad. Yeah, they came from the Philippines. So
Tagalog?
A little bit. Yeah, I would say I'm semi-fluent.
Right. When I was in college, my wife and I were married and we had a kid. We were in college together. I worked in a dietary department in a hospital, and it was 27 Filipinos and me.
So many.
And they were all related, and they were all from the same church, and we were like feeding.
Really?
Oh yeah.
That's actually not that typical. Okay.
It was in Anchorage, Alaska. It was a super tight knit Filipino community, and stuff like that. I worked with them for 3 years, and I was the only white guy, and I was a foot taller than everybody. And man, they put me through the ringer. They tried to teach me some Tagalog, but they also tried to they kind of made me eat balut and some of these other foods that I was like, balut was really hard. Am I saying?
Yeah, balut.
Balut.
Yeah. Balut. Almost like a sound, balut.
Do you like it?
Yeah. I don't enjoy like the idea of it or like the texture of it. Not that I'm like vegan or anything like that, but it's jarring to eat.
Yes.
A duck fetus. So it's not my favorite thing.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah, but the soup, is good of it, which is, if you think about it, it's embryonic fluid. So you can't really call it like soup.
I know.
But
I'll never forget it.
Wow, you're so brave.
I was in one of the little coffee shops. Well, there's this one, I can't even remember her name, but she was old. She was like almost 70 years old. She was working there. And I don't know, she spoke with such authority whenever she talked to me. I just kind of did whatever she told me to do. And one day I went into the coffee shop, and in the bottom of the fridge, there was this thing of eggs in this. Or this kind of container. And I said, "What is that?" And she goes, "You're going to eat it." And I was like, oh, no, I've heard of this one. I like, Jason told me about it.
She told you.
Yeah. And she's like, no, you're going to eat it. And I was like, okay. And I sat it, and there was like 6 Filipino women just watching me, just as I'm trying to do the thing.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, it's like the best thing I've ever heard. Crazy. They use it on like Fear Factor and stuff like that.
Yeah. I spent some time on your YouTube and on Instagram and kind of reading more about your life, and you're a queer person of faith. And on your YouTube channel, especially, that there's a real big expression of that part of it. Can you tell us a little bit about when that part of yourself began to be accepted and when you started putting that into your art?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know when I was consciously putting it into my art. What happened was I was 23 and I fell in love with my best friend. So I didn't grow up thinking that I was queer or anything like that. I mean, of course, looking back, you're like, that makes sense. I had a lot of female best friends that I felt really close to, but I didn't think that necessarily that I was queer. And so when I fell in love with my best friend, that was a whole thing. And ever since I've only dated women, but to express it in my art, it just felt like that was what was true. Cause I love stories. That's my favorite story to tell. And so I was just like, oh, well, I'll just do this with a woman because that's not my story. I've never been in love with a man. So I actually can't even draw upon that experience. When it started to be more deliberate in terms of me expressing that I was a queer person of faith was when I say enter the church a year after my breakup, just because I grew up Catholic with a relationship to God. But when I left to move to LA on my own, I had to discover my own faith. And when I broke up with my girlfriend, I felt really like I needed something. What I didn't know at that time was the evangelical space. It was, presented more as like non-denominational in this LA community. And so, of course, maybe for some people it's not of course, but I suspect for many, I realized pretty quickly that like the queer piece wasn't as integrated as I thought or hoped it would be. And that didn't trigger me personally. It more triggered me looking around me and seeing the queer community in faith spaces who were met with resistance, but even worse, almost like this understated resistance that was not said out loud. So it was more internal that they felt like this struggle. And that's when I started being like, I'm a queer person of faith. I'm a queer person of faith. Like for me, there was no time but to just jump into it and see like, what is this battle? I'm a part of it. And like, I want to see what's going on. And it was all I could express through my art for a really long time because I just felt so passionate about what was happening, I think.
Yeah. And how old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
30.
30. So like, oh, wow, you're heading into your 30s.
So I just hit my 30.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
30 is I remember 30 was so young now that I'm 44. This is another thing I was observing on your YouTube channel is just seeing how lithe and how just fluid all the movements were, even when you're getting into cash register stuff. It kind of quickly moves back into the taffy movement. And I was thinking, man, that would hurt. like from a physical fitness standpoint, you have to stay in pretty good shape to do what you do, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a workout, like you have like a specific workout routine or practice that kind of keeps you in that space besides just dancing?
To keep my sort of flexibility and agility in check, it is dancing for me. But I always cross train with some. I hike every morning.
In
it's
LA?
not a strength. I'm in Riverside right now, so I'm like an hour and a half away. But even in LA,
you can hike in it. I didn't even know this. I'm from Alaska and Hawaii. I picture and every time I go to LA, it's the airport, or it's Disneyland or something like that.
Right,
so I don't picture there like being any kind of wilderness or anything in LA.
Yeah, we have pockets. they're more in the mountain, know, they're just, they're more, it's like not so far. It's just like a little mountaintop and it's not that much green, but it's, we get pretty lucky with the spots that we have. So, I hike. And when I was performing all the time, I just started doing my first dance job in quarantine again. So I really feel motivated to cross train again, but I would always pick up like another discipline. Right now it's just running and walking and then lifting. I'd lift a lot of weights, but before it would be like, I would pick up boxing entirely. I would pick up Pilates entirely or yoga entirely. And these different disciplines of movement are just super helpful. But I always have to have something in tandem with dance.
Yeah. Speaking of quarantine, COVID is such a unique thing because this has been such an anti-touch time. And I was curious about how when it dropped in March, when the quarantine hit in March and everybody kind of shut down, we all went through kind of different levels of, I guess you could say, trauma kind of transition.
Yeah.
We own a boat company and tour. We take people snorkeling and sailing and stuff in Hawaii, right? In Maui. So for us, it was total business shutdown, right? But we're also like, we're pretty good at being homebodies, that kind of thing. I was curious about what it would be like for a person whose whole life and career is based on touch and movement and work and in choreography, working with others in that very close and very intimate space. What was your experience of that kind of transition?
Honestly, I got busy really quickly. That's kind of how my mind works. I just started teaching dance classes online. I
Oh,
think when
wow.
I started feeling maybe the absence of touch was when I start to freestyle. I freestyle really often, almost every day, but a lot of my favorite freestyling is contact improv with people. And
Yeah.
for me, gosh, it's a download of that person's spirit almost, and it's something that you give and a give and take. It is something I deeply miss. I don't think about it so consciously. I also act, so all of my acting classes have been over Zoom, so I actually have had to create a lot of imagination muscle, so it's been helpful in that way. Like, I still feel accompanied by sort of my mind and experiencing people like how you and I are talking right now, but
Right.
yeah, the physical touch aspect, I think, is really important to talk about, especially with my dancers and my dance students who have been battling, with their mental health. Like,
Yeah.
gosh, thank God I'm at this age, and even at this age, it's really hard. But
Right.
when I was younger, yeah, a lot of like dance is a highly sensual,
Right.
movement.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking about that because when I was watching YouTube, because I was thinking there's probably a lot of people in your classes that a big part of their reason, whether consciously or unconsciously, they come to those classes is for touch and is for that kind of that relationship of intimacy, that not necessarily a sexual relationship. Being a guy who's been terrified of dancing, I noticed even when I was just dancing with my wife, you know what I mean, how just beautiful and intimate it is. And of course, we're in love with each other.
Yes.
But I don't know. I'm a guy. I can watch movies and see, hey, man, I have this dancing going, wow, that's just great,
Yeah.
and people can't do that right now.
Yeah, wow, that is a really great point to bring up, is the element of I actually did go to a freestyle session recently,
Oh, you did?
and it was distanced, and it was my turn to go when we were all doing, solos, and I looked at my friend next to me, and I was like, I wish you could go
Oh,
out with
yeah.
me. I wish we could just dance. I mean, that's really my love language, is
Right.
being able to dance. Yeah, is being able to dance with
Yeah.
people. So it's highly missed. Yeah.
And we have to get that back. We got to get that back.
I know. The dance community is really, gosh, we've been hit pretty hard, but they're really resilient, and and dancers make a way. So
is that a thing?
Yeah.
Is that a thing for you guys? Like you're talking about that right now, kind of you helping each other
Oh
through
yeah.
that, and we'll be together again, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know even if it's necessarily we'll be together again. I mean, of course, we like hope and feel that. A lot of the people my age are talking about, it's kind of sad, but dance is always going to be a part of our lives. But a lot of us, we're already transitioning out anyway, in terms of, either just teaching more, choreographing more, just doing specific jobs, not like hustling as much, like acting and things like that. So we talk about how, hey, remember, and when we moved out when we were 19 and we were in LA and we had no idea what was going on and we became professionals, like we're kind of like egging each other on that way, like whatever you want to do next, whatever endeavor you have next, you have the wherewithal because we did it before. Dancers really can work from the ground up. They find resources, they find a way, and so we do support each other right now. We are like a family. We always will be. We all grew up together in LA. Like brothers and sisters, and we had to watch sort of like 3 or 4 of our homes get closed down in the quarantine. Big successful studios that we really grew up in. We grew up there together, touching and crying, and dance is so spiritual too, having our life moments, talking about, are you going to move back home, in these spaces, and just close down one right after another.
So from that perspective, what gives you hope? What is the thing that you kind of latch on to that gives you kind of pulls you forward, gets you out of bed every day?
Yeah, I just believe so much in that there's no shortage of clarity or joy. I just believe that there is no shortage. I've never looked back and been like, oh, there was no more ahead. There was always more, always more. it's almost unrelenting, you know, and I just care so much about how I feel now, because it's, for me, I found it's the only compass, you know, to really check in and say, where do I feel right now? And is there capacity to feel joy within this moment? And I think quarantine has really concentrated that muscle. And I think where human beings are naturally supposed to sit is to be conscious and aware of where the joy is in the moment. I think that that's actually natural. I think we've, you know, grown away from that. So just time and time again, I find it through different spaces. There's no little thing, and that just pulls me forward, because I think I don't want to miss out on that.
Right.
I think it's just so great. Yeah.
Right. Hey, can we talk about Bliss for a minute?
Yeah.
In the podcast, but also in my normal life, I get to meet a lot of really interesting people. And my job being, you know, that we have a catamaran out in Maui, you know, we take a lot of famous people or, you know, that kind of thing out on the boat, and I get to hang out with them and just chat with them about their stories. Even just talking with your everyday normal guy like myself, we have these stories that we experience bliss. You know, you're out hiking and you have this moment of just, you know, the other day I was back at this waterfall and I witnessed an Iranian man playing. It's called like I can't remember the name of the instrument. It's an Iranian instrument. It's a sutra. It was like the precursor to the piano, and you play with these little hammer tongs on your fingers.
Oh, like a sit. Oh, no, I don't know what it's called.
It was absolutely. And I just sat and watched by this waterfall and watched him play this, and it was absolutely jaw dropping. It was one of the most moments of just where time just kind of stops, you know. And I was thinking about, you know, other times in my life, like when I saw U2 in concert, and the Edge was like standing like 5 feet in front of me, jamming on his guitar, and I'm just. But for you, like you've performed on stage with like Nicki Minaj and Ariana Grande and all these, you've been on into these settings. Can you tell us the story of one of these moments? I don't know. And it doesn't have to be when you're on stage. Any moment where you were like, that was bliss.
I have many. Do you prefer like dancing or not dancing?
Whatever comes to mind. Our second episode, we had a chef who was like cook for the president and cook for all these really amazing chef and stuff. And I asked him a question about, you know, favorite meal, like if you got your last meal, what would you have? Who would cook it for you, kind of thing. And I was expecting this, you know, I'd have this famous chef cook me this amazing thing. Instead, he was like, Thanksgiving meal, I want my kid to cook it for me. And I was like, oh. And the way he described it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, you know. So I'm always surprised by how people, what they consider to be bliss, you know?
Gosh, so many moments.
Right.
Maybe every God, it's.
And you're only 30 years old. I'm like, oh, you're like,
like I mean, I was like, do you want me to tell you today's, you know, but in terms of,
I do want to hear today's though, by the way, I do.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of movement, I'm also a teacher and an educator, and it's my favorite thing when I'm really in the space where I can touch the student, and I do this thing where I can observe them. I just see where they're at, if they're going across the floor, which means they're just dancing across the floor in a sort of freestyle space to maybe a like melodic song. And I just want to see like what they do going across, and then I give them a task, whatever it is. And it's my favorite thing to observe where they're at and then kind of download and be a vessel to whatever, like the universe or whatever you want to call it. And I approach them, and then when we touch, we are completely in sync, and I've never danced with them in my life. And I intuitively know what it's like to help them along and to connect with them deeply and to deeply see them. And I feel also completely seen by them. And those moments to me are just nothing short of magical, because I've never met them before. You know, we don't really record in that space or film in that space, but a lot of maybe the videos that you've seen where I'm dancing with someone else and it seems like it's choreographed. Like those are not choreographed. Those are not choreographed. Kidding. Yeah, a lot of them, like the majority of my favorite moments, they look completely choreographed with these people that I only danced with like once before. And to me, that's just complete joy and bliss to just have something outside of yourself that you're completely present with. It's almost like, you know, when you're in a relationship with someone, it is the two of you, but you're almost creating a third, which is the union of the both of you, right? It's almost like this result of you two and then maybe God. And so there's a product, and that's what I love creating in dance, you know, and you do that all the time in dance. For me, I teach my students, and it's something that I've been taught by many. You always have a partner, you know, because if the audience is your partner, you must be present with the audience. The music is your partner. The ground is your partner. Your skin is your partner, so that you understand that you always need to have a generous energy. Because if not, you're thinking about, what do I need to do? You're just not there. You're just not in that space. You're almost in like a first circle, like back energy sort of thing, instead of being in this union. Yeah, in this connection.
Wow. Well, when a student comes in and they start dancing and you get that sense that they are not in that their energy is not it's not generous. What do you do to help them?
Yeah, I don't approach it really head on, at first, but I am always like conscious of that
Right.
person. And I think, I never push, I never allow. I kind of speak from the place of making this space feel very safe and saying like, you don't have to even just, I'll demonstrate the simplest movements. Sometimes you can feel the energy sucked out of the room if you're like, okay, watch me and this person, and that person happens to be advanced, and y'all both go into this elaborate thing, and then you feel sometimes that there are certain people that are like, oh, oh my God, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they go inward. And then I always have to bring it back to, but the point is, and then I'll bring out, someone or that same person, and we'll just have our hands touching and just walk. And I'll be like, this is the point though. You know what I mean? That's actually the point, is the eye contact, is the union. Nothing I do, you cannot dance 20 years of experience at a skilled level to gain connection. That's just not it, like to equal one moment of presence. It's not, it's like dirt compared to gold. Like it's gold to just be present with someone. That's the point, I think, of art, but it's definitely the point of dance. Dance is a communication. So I try to just talk about the essence of it.
For some reason, when I hear you say that as a tool, when you have their hands together and you're walking them across the floor, that for some people that would be hard for me. I can do that with my wife, right? But like for me, if you put me with anybody else, you know what I mean? That idea of connecting would just scare the crap out of me. Like, you know what I mean? And I imagine you probably see some people like that when they come into the studio and they're basically asking you to help them grow in that way.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I feel like if you were in the room with us and we were all in there and the music was going, I think that you would cross that line. I've actually never seen someone not cross that line. It's even just a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. For some reason, I think it's the music. I do not know what it is. Right. It's very disarming, I mean, that's my first intention, is creating just like this safe sort of space. So
sure. I'm assuming you've seen some bad teachers too out there that are just like, I mean, come on. I mean, I've been in lots of yoga classes, sure. And then there's sometimes you get in that one yoga instructor and you just feel like you just like, just get in that position. They're just going to ram you into that, you know what I mean? And then you get those ones that really kind of do what you're talking about,
It's true. I mean, that's why I started teaching. I didn't even really want to start teaching. Well, I really didn't even want to start teaching. I thought that it would take me away from my dance as a performer, but I went to a class where someone was like not present at all with the students. And this was a phenomenal dancer, but I just felt like, oh gosh, like that's not right. So I applied like at that same place. There will always be, I've taken from many teachers that were well-intentioned, I'm sure, but just, not good. Not good because they were just not present,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's the most fun you've ever had on stage, actually performing in front of people?
The most fun, fun.
Again, really hard. But one of those, I was watching you were dancing behind Nikki Minaj. I was just going, oh my gosh, to do that, to be in front of that with the music and the lights and the audience going nuts and the superstar dancing in front of you. And what's one that stands out in your mind? You're like, that was just amazing.
Honestly, some of my most professional jobs, they are really fun, but there's quite a bit of thinking sometimes, on stage. I remember with the Nicki Minaj one, there was thinking, because that was my first award show. So of course
that was Billboard, right? That was the Billboard Awards show?
That was the Billboard Awards, yeah. I was thinking of hitting my marks in that, which it happened.
Yeah.
One where I let go, I would say probably was more so Ariana, and because it wasn't as intricate, I'd say, and you really just knew you were a part of a moment. We were with women of all generations, women that we looked up to were on that job that first inspired me ever. Wow. Like Teresa Espinosa from Janet Jackson's tour that I watched, she was dancing next to me.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Some of my best friends that I grew up with, people that had taken my class, so it was just generations of these women. I say generations because I really look at us as a family. I think it's a dance family. And so that to me was really fun in the way that it was just so fulfilling, so transcendent. That it's a once in a lifetime thing.
Okay, I just have a couple more questions for you.
No, yeah,
How do you
please.
grow old gracefully as a hip hop dancer? You're going to be 40 in 10 years, you know?
I am.
It kind of speeds up as you go. My 40s are going a lot faster than my 30s did, and 30s went faster than mine.
Wow.
20s did, and most of that is because the more people you have that are younger than you, showing you what you used to feel like or what your body used to be able to do and that kind of stuff like that, the more you tend to go, whoa, like, wow, I can't do that anymore. I can't, you know what I mean? You did mention that you're doing less of that and doing more teaching and stuff now. What does it look like to be a 50-year-old hip hop dancer?
You know, I don't know.
Is this a good question? Did I throw you for a loop on this one?
I think that this is it's a good question. I am, you know, kind of like scouring my mind. Like, I mean, I'll always dance, I think. I do know many people in their 40s that have aged gracefully. I don't plan on being a professional hip hop dancer when I'm, 50.
Right.
Yeah, even now, I actually have new goals for my fitness in terms of like, what are the most agile things that I can do now that maybe are not just dance related? Like, how can I have like the most power, the most strength, the most flexibility now, especially going into acting more so and more things that I feel like my body has to be super fit, of course.
Sure.
But dancing is also a limited trope in terms of fitness too. I kind of want to be able to do a bunch of pull-ups now. You know what I mean? I think that I can engage into different disciplines, but I don't know what it's like to be like a 40-year-old, 50-year-old. We are so fortunate. We learned how to take care of our bodies in a way that's really meticulous. Because if you're not pretty much an athlete, you're not really going to work. Like I couldn't work when I wasn't at my best physically, because this is your instrument. You have to stretch all the time. Even if you don't want to go to class, but you know that you're going to class just for your body, you go to class. I mean, the best hip hop dancers were always trained in other styles as well, or they treated their training like a physical discipline, just drilling, boom, 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 just drilling, because it's physical. It is an art, but we're athletes. It's a sport, So I kind of have that knowledge. So moving forward, I can't go a day without moving. It's not really an option for me. I plan to still be graceful. Yeah.
Well, if you're like most of the Filipino women that I know, you're probably going to be fine. They didn't really age. All the the people that I worked with, it was like, man, like white women, they get old. Like my mom's family, the Scottish family, like when you get old, you look old and you feel old, But it seemed like all the Filipino women, they should be like, I'm 50. I'm like, you look like you're 30.
I know.
I didn't. Okay, you're gonna want to Google this. You're gonna dig this. The biggest,
I'll write it down.
Yeah, the biggest Hawaiian hula competition is called the Merry Monarch Festival. They do that every year in Honolulu. It is epic. So these groups of hula dancers do amazing, beautiful hula. The thing about hula that's interesting versus maybe hip hop, dancing behind Nikki Minaj, whatever, you'll have a 65-year-old woman doing hula. The Polynesian art form of hula, it ages. Yeah. Just to see how it's just so graceful. And then the men with all, the Polynesian men with the power that they bring in, but also the beauty as well. It's
right.
It's awesome. You'll dig it. You'll really dig it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Hey, see, I'm watching the dancing. I just got to pull that, out of myself.
No, I love that. You can, and you totally can, and you totally will. And yes. I can't wait. You'll have to tell me when you go out and you're like, all right, I got it.
I'm sure my wife will message you and go, thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Y'all two together.
That's awesome.
I can't wait.
So there's one last thing I want to ask you to do for us. At the end of every episode of The Voyagers, I ask the guests to give a blessing to the audience. It's just from you, from your heart, or your experience, your life, and just something that you would leave them with as a blessing.
Only you have lived your life. Only you have had this experience, and it's so important for all of us that you follow your joy and your bliss and what makes your heart sing. Don't do it for all of us. Do it for yourself, because you're meant for joy. But just know that when you take those steps, whether it feels courageous in the moment or not, or just like the next logical thing to do, the most natural thing to do is to follow that instinct. Know right after that, that's helping all of us do that as well. So any quirk, anything that you feel like makes you different, please follow it. Please, I ask of you, and I thank you in advance, and I thank you that you have been doing it. I bless you with today. It's just the appreciation of your individuality.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. And Joe, this is awesome. This is going to be great.
This is really great. Thank you so much.
The Voyagers podcast is produced by Sugar Sled Productions and recorded in Hula on the island of Maui. It's hosted by me, David Glenn Taylor. A huge mahalo nui to Jasmine for giving her time and wisdom and convincing me that I can dance. Frankly, I can't wait for the next opportunity to give it a shot. Check out Jasmine's YouTube channel. Follow her on Instagram at Jasmine J. Raphael. After this interview, I am convinced that watching one hip-hop dance video a day is good for the soul. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It helps me grow the audience, keep the conversation going. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor or in supporting this podcast, go to voyagerspodcast.com and click the link to become a Patreon supporter and to become a sponsor. Let's just start a conversation by email, david@voyagerspodcast.com. Next week on the penultimate episode of Season 1 of the Voyagers podcast, we're talking to Stefan Schaefer, a talented filmmaker and a good friend here on the island. He's got a new movie. It debuted this week at the Hawaii Film Festival and is coming to a streaming soon called Aloha Surf Hotel. We talk about how to bring a script to life, why anybody would ever watch a horror movie, and what's next in his career. That's next week on the Voyagers podcast. Mahalo for listening, friends.